Hello, I am recording another video. This one is a deck profile of a deck I've been playing a lot recently, much to the chagrin of my friends. So this is the reason why they're thinking of putting Vandal Blast and Farewell back in all their decks. I am going to show you the deck profile that I am doing for Urza. If I bring it up a bit closer without the shining. Urza Chief Artificer. So this is the Brothers War Precon guy, and it is a very fun deck. We'll be going through it. I have set myself a challenge with this deck. I feel like I have succeeded. All of the cards have to have retro framing, so every upgrade I got had to have a retro frame version so I could play it. If I can't get a retro frame version, then that card is unavailable for the deck. I have found some interesting cards I could put in here, and I'm not going to show you what the card is, but as you can see in this pile of white, there is one in a different sleeve. That is because the white are all the tokens, and the other is a playtest translation of a card I am running because the wording on it is very weird. I will show you when it comes up, but for now, this is my Urza deck. So we're going to start off with the cards that were not in the precon. These were in the Mishra precon. So these are cards that you should pick up from the Mishra precon before you pick up the Urza one, or buy these singles at least. We have Emery of the Lock. Basically you mill, get artifacts from grave, and it costs maybe 1 blue mana at most, usually, because you have so many artifacts on the field. Spoiler alert. Oh, I didn't even say what Urza does. How unprofessional. So Urza is a 4/5 for 6 mana, but does have affinity for artifact creatures, so it can only cost 3 usually. And affinity does go over command attacks. So if I have like 6 command attacks on top of my usual, but I have 9 artifact creatures, this will still cost 3 mana. That being said, it gives all of my artifact creatures menace, and and on every end step I will create a construct that is gets +1/+1 for each artifact that's on the field, including itself. Fairly straightforward, gets very disgusting. So Emery, being a non-artifact creature, will not add to that total, but has an ability because of that total. Next we have protection in the form of Padim, again in the Mishra precon. Basically gives all of your artifacts hexproof, and if you have the highest artifact mana value, which 9 times out of 10 you do, you get to draw a card every upkeep, which is very lovely. Then we go into the artifact creatures that we picked up from the Mishra precon, which is the Metalwork Colossus, a 11 mana 10/10 that costs X less, where X is the amount of is the mana cost of all of your non-creature artifacts that are out. Don't worry, you get plenty of those. This usually costs about 1 or 2 mana at most. Very good. It's just a 10/10 that comes out of nowhere. Next we have Silas. Silas is a artifact creature with Death Touch that just says, hey, if I deal combat damage to a player with this creature, I get to look at get a artifact from my graveyard and cast it this turn. If I don't cast it this turn, obviously it stays in grave. Then we go into the non-artifact creatures. We have non-creature artifacts. We have Mirrorworks. So whenever I cast whenever any non-token artifact enters the battlefield under my control, I may pay 2, and if I do, I create a token that is a copy of that artifact. I mean, so like for example, I paid 1 mana for Metalwork Colossus. I now paid 3. I now have 2 Metalwork Colossuses. Yeah. Also, it does state non-token, so you can't do it for the constructs, but you can do it for other things in the deck. Then we have Machine God's Effigy, which just reads, when it comes in as a copy of a target creature, and it can tap for blue. The best part is it doesn't become a creature in addition, it stays as just an artifact. So if your opponent has a really good effect on a creature, you can gain that effect yourself and limit the removal that can be used on it, because they can't remove it with creature removal. So for example, if I copy someone's Kappa Cannoneer or something with this, it will still have the ward, it will still have everything, it just won't be a creature. So you can get a creature that has like really good protection, and then go, haha, I now have that as an artifact. Next we have Ica Wellspring, which is basically just a 2 mana draw a card, and if it ever dies, draw another card. Fairly simple. And a Wondrous Crucible, which is a 7 mana. Everything now has Ward 2, including itself, and it will, at the end step, mill 2 cards. Get a card from your graveyard at random that is a non-land, so you have to separate the lands to make sure. And then you exile the card that you chose, and you will make a copy of it. And the final one from this from the Mishra Precon that I added was the Forecast. I mean, it's Artifact Affinity. Of course, you're gonna run a Forecast. Like draw 2 for like 1 blue mana is kind of nice. It's good to play Pot of Greed, so we'll put that there. Next we go into the cards that are in the Urza Precon. So let me finish that up from over here, because I still have a few from over here. Here we go. So, from the Mishra the Urza Precon that I kept, we have the Dolken Humiliator. It basically says if there are 3 more artifacts on the field when you attack with this, all your opponents get turned into 1/1s without their effects until end of turn. Good way to get removal out, etc. Then we have a Whirler Rogue, which is just when it enters, you create 2 1/1 Thopter tokens. Bear in mind that will go towards the affinity for your Urza, but also you can tap 2 untapped artifacts to make any creature unblockable. Bear in mind we're going to get like nearly 20 like more constructs. Yeah. Next we have ourselves, I forget his name, and it is white on white, so give me a second. It is Loshil Clockwork Scholar, I think is his name. Basically, if I was to attack with an artifact, it prevents all damage that are dealt to that artifact. And whenever one or more artifacts enter the battlefield, it has to be an artifact creature specifically, you get to draw a card, but that's only once that turn. Then we have Indomitable Archangel for our final non-artifact creature, who basically just says, hey, artifacts you control now have Shroud, because you have 3 artifacts. Which is useful, isn't useful, depends on your board state, but it can be quite useful. So for the first one from the precon that I kept, we have Mere Battlesphere. I mean, it creates 4 tokens on entry, which again gets rid of the affinity, and it also can tap those Mias to make itself bigger and deal a lot more damage. There's no reason not to run Mere Battlesphere. Then we have Etched Champion, which is a 3 mana creature that just says, hey, I have protection from all colours. Still Overseer, which is giving +1/+1 to all of your artifact creatures, which again is a good portion of the deck, including the tokens you're creating. Crone Courier allows you to search on the top of your library until you, like, I think the top 3 you pick one of them, no, top 2 on entry. You get to pick one to put to your hand, the other to the grave. If the card that you put to your hand is an artifact, you gain 3 life. We then have Steel Hellkite. 6 mana, potentially destroy a good portion of your opponent's board, especially a token player. Yeah. Master of Ethereum is just another construct, but also gives a 1/1 to everything. Master Thopterist. Oh, why is he in with the artifact creatures? He should be over here. Basically, whenever I cast an artifact, I'll create a 1/1 colorless Thopter, and you can pay a blue and a colorless to sacrifice any artifact and draw a card. Well, you have to sack 2 artifacts. Talking of which, with Metalwork Colossus, you can sack 2 artifacts while it's in the grave to add it back to your hand. So that might come in handy. Thought Monitor instead of just Forecast now, so we get more card draw for our artifacts. There's a very heavy affinity package in here, which you kind of have to run due to the fact of what your commander does. We then have the Baleful Strix, just a card draw on a 1/1 flyer. That's also an artifact that ups your artifact count. Noxious Gearhulk, which is a removal, life gain, and artifact count, and has menace. Like, it's a decent package in one card. Ethereum Sculptor. I mean, lower the cost of artifacts, of course you want that. Filigree Attendant, a flying construct with 3 toughness though, but still very hard for opponents to deal with sometimes. Very good. That's it for the creatures in that section. We're still going through the Urza precon stuff. We're now going into the artifacts of cranial plating. Basically turns one of your creatures into a construct in attack only. You have Photoshop, which is whenever one or more artifact creatures you control die, you get to draw a card. You only do that once per turn, but you can also pay 3 mana and tap it to create a colourless Photoshop again. Because again, artifact count is very fun. Swiftfoot Boots. I actually opened the foil in one of my pre-con packs, so I'm running the foil version. We have the Liquid Metal Torque, turn Swank into an artifact, of course is very good, plus also it is a mana rock. Talking of mana rocks, we have the Soul Ring and the Arcane Signet. Then we have the Fort Vessel. We also have a Skull Clamp. Basically destroy all these Fopters we're creating with other abilities and draw a bunch of cards. We have a Bident Assassin for the last of the artifacts, but it does go nicely into our next section of this deck, which is the enchantments, which is Tempered Steel. Just get +2/+2 on all your artifacts, and a Fopter Spy Network to create more Fopters. Next we go into the sorceries from the precon that we kept, which is March of Progress, which is basically Cyclonic Rift mana, but you either create 1 copy of 1 artifact creature that you have on the board. It has to be a token just an artifact creature in particular, or if you overload it with Cyclonic Rift mana, all of your artifact creatures are copied. So you get a copy of each of them, which doubles your artifact count 9 times out of 10. And gives you a few ETBs, it gives you more room to play with. Like for example, you could go, right now I have 2 Metalwork Colossuses, I'm going to swing with this one and leave this one behind the block now. Talking of Metalwork Colossus, we have the one with the machine, potentially draw 11, always good, but also you do have some higher cost artifacts in here, like Wondrous Crucible. Even something that's like 4 or 5 mana, paying 4 or 5 mana to draw 4 or 5 is still good. Then we have a Preordain. I mean, just scrying 2 and drawing 1 isn't too bad. We have a protection in the form of unblockable formation, which basically just says, hey, they're now indestructible, and if it's on your main phase you did this, they also get +1/+1 in vigilance. And the removal of a Swords to Plowshares. That is it for the precon stuff. So if you bought the 2 precons, you would have this part of the deck already. Outside the lands, but we'll get into those. Now we're going to go into the additions I made. Bear in mind, as I said, the whole restriction I had was it has to be retro frame. So we're going to go in order of things that surprised me that were in retro frame, rather than like actual synergies. Although there is one synergy that is really funny together that shocked me as much as the other part did, so they are right next to each other. But we'll go into the ones that didn't shock me that at all, that I kind of already knew they were. So like Ornithopter, Solemn Simulacrum. Yes, technically Solemn's in the precon, but this particular art isn't. We have Springleaf Drum, Mishra's Bauble, Helm of the Host, Mystic Forge, and Sculpting Steel and Unwinding Clock. These are all the artifacts that really didn't surprise me. I already knew Ornithopter. I've been running Mishra Baubles in a few decks already, and so I already knew it had this. And I always liked the Helm of the Host in this frame, so yeah, none of this surprised me. Although I will say Unwinding Clock is insanely disgusting in this deck. Then we go into the non-artifacts of the ones that only slightly surprised me. Well, not already, which is like Rhystic Study. Yes, I'm disgusting, I know. Brainstorm and Counterspell. These are the 3 that I'm like, yeah, of course, they're like, they are from old sets, of course they are. Like, I'll be surprised if they were like no old borders. Next we go into 2 that I didn't realise. So we have the Foundry Inspector and the Ornithopter. I was slightly surprised. I was like, oh, it makes sense, but like I just didn't think about it that much, I guess. But yeah, these two were in retro, so were very nice additions. Then we go into a card that I didn't even know existed in Sarbo's Web. So we're getting into the ones that actually shocked me a fair bit. So this just is like an Ica Wellspring, except it doesn't draw you a card when it dies, but instead it will not let anybody untap a land that has a non-mana ability on it that you have to activate. So for example, something that like a Reliquary Tower was still untapped because it's not an activated ability. But something like Maze of Ith, something like I don't know the name of the land, but there's like a land that will tap for mana, but then you can put mana into it and you can draw a card, or each player draws a card. That also won't untap. So it's a tiny bit of stacks, but it's not the most annoying stacks. Like, as long as most of your lands tap for mana only and do silly ways of doing mana, like Gaia's Cradle will still untap, by the way, then it's not really going to affect you. So it's not the worst thing. It's just a nice draw card and can sometimes fuck someone over if they're doing really bullshitty things. Next we go into Metalworker. Yes, I spent money on this deck. This is a card, again, I didn't know existed. I saw it in a game nights when I was building this, and I was like, oh, that's good. And then I saw it was in the retro frame. I'm like, oh, that's brilliant. So I looked for the retro frame, found out the price, went white in the face for a minute, and then found out a way of getting it. So yeah, Metalworker, very good. You just get a fuck ton of mana off of this. One that really did surprise me is I didn't know they reprinted Esper Sentinel in retro frame. I was not told of this. This is very good. Artifact creature as well. Yeah. Talking of artifact creatures that got reprinted that I didn't know. Kappa Cannoneer has a retro frame now. Modern Horizons 3 is a godsend for this deck. Well, Modern Horizons 2 and 3, because that's Modern Horizons 2, I'm pretty sure, and that's Modern Horizons 3. It is insane that those work that way. Oh. Then we have, they reprinted the really annoying Urza in retro frame. It is insane that they did this. All my artifacts now tap for blue mana. I can pay 5 to just cast anything from the top of my library for free. Yeah, it's insane. And then we just go, oh, also Khan Legacy Reforged. Because why not have a retro of something that just gives me a bunch of mana? And then we'll go into the combo that I didn't think would have retros, but both sides have retros. We have the Myco 7th Lattice in retro. This was a Judge promo, and it is legitimately in retro. You can only get it as a foil, and it is a Judge promo specifically. But you say, Richard, what is the combo? Surely they didn't print Khan, the Great Creator, a Planeswalker as retro. Yes, they did in a secret lair. That is legitimately, let me get it close, Khan, the Great Creator. And it is extremely verbose in what it does. But it actually does a thing. And to prove that this is actually a card and not just some stupid printing, this is an actual Magic card. Why did they do this? So when I said I was going to, this is what I put at the back of my, like, at the back of these. This is that card from earlier. Because nobody is going to read this extremely verbose. Like, it is literally 20, like, it's like the biggest paragraph in Magic. Just to do this. Because it has to mention that you can attack it instead of me. You have to mention that there's loyalty counters, and if loyalty counters go, they die. It cannot attack or block, it is not a creature. All this sort of stuff. It's simplified on here, but to make it work in my deck, I am running the Secret Lair version. And I have definitely had some looks of what the fuck is that when I played it. Now, the reason I run Khan is because if you exile a good artifact, I can bring it back because it can bring from exile specifically, as long as it's face up. And Mycosynth, I'm playing Constructs as my win con. Of course I'm running Mycosynth Lattice to turn everything into an artifact and get like a 30-30 Construct. So yeah, they have their reasons. They do lock, like, because if you don't know the Khan lock, it's Khan says opponents cannot use the activated abilities of artifacts. This turns everything into artifacts. Lands actually have the activated ability of creating mana. They don't just do it. You have to tap it to activate the ability to get mana. So by turning your lands into artifacts and having a card out, you cannot produce mana off of your lands. You are basically locked out of the game. It is not the reason I run both. They both have their own reasons. It's just kind of disgusting when they're both out. I feel like I have to state this. Do not do the Khan lock if you value your friendships. And then we go into the lands. Now, we are playing a construct deck, so it makes sense that we run the 3 basic artifact lands of Seat of the Synod, Ancient Den, and Vault of Whispers. But then we run the 3 bridges that you can run that are also artifacts, and the Darksteel Citadel. Because these are land artifacts, which means they can still get destroyed by like a Vandal Blast, except for the bridges, because they are indestructible, same with Citadel. But it does like up your artifact count with very little removal. Then we are running Tron, because Tron obviously came out like very early in Magic history, so these are the very original Antiquities Tron lands. Surprisingly cheap. I think I paid £10 for the entire set of 3, so you know, take with that as you will. But yeah, I put Tron in here because it's all retro frame. Then we have the obvious land staples of Command Tower and Reliquary Tower, but then we also have a Maze of If, because it is a retro frame that allows us to stop being attacked. Yes, it won't untap if I have Sarbo's Web out, but normally that doesn't come up, and even if it does, oh no. You know, like it is what it is. Just either don't draw the card if you prefer the Maze of If, or don't care about the Maze of If you want to draw the card, or find a way to get rid of your own Sarbo's Web later. Then we have the lands that I like to call fetch lands, even though they're technically eh. We have obviously Ash Barrens and Evolving Wilds that are technically fetch lands. Then we have the Scry lands in Temple of Deceit, Temple of Silence, and Temple of Enlightenment. We have the bounce lands in Orzhov Beliska, Dimir Aqueduct, and Azorius Chancery. We then have the tapped unless you have 2 basic lands in Sunken Hollow and Prairie Stream. We then have a normal tap land in the form of Path of Ancestry and Arcane Sanctum. Obviously Path of Ancestry lets you scry if you cast a human or an artificer with it, and Bajuka Bog to exile a graveyard that I don't like. And then we have the basics of 1, 2, 3, 4 islands, 1, 2, 3, 4 plains, and 3 swamps. And that is it. That is the entire deck. This deck is extremely fun. It seems janky when you look at it, like how I've just done it. It seems just like, oh, there's not really, outside of the constructs, it don't do much, I guess. But if this deck gets going, I've had it where I've become a threat on like turn 3, and like I had to get farewelled out of the game. And unfortunately, I had 2 non-artifacts on the board, which were like 2 of my 4 lands. So I was just sort of sat there going, oh, okay, like I guess I scoop because I have like 2 cards in hand and 2 lands. Like I really don't see me coming back from this when everyone has a board state, you know. But I ain't gonna say that it wasn't justified. Like it was very justified that I was killed. So yeah, it is one of those sort of decks where once you start upgrading it and you get to the point where I've gotten to, it feels very horrible to play it at certain tables, but it's still very fun and it is very fragile. I have played it at casual tables because I do say how fragile it is. I'm like, look, if you have any board wipes in your deck, if you get them off at the right time, I'm just out of the game. Like I can't do anything. So you basically have a free person game at that point, and you're going to probably win. And it has gotten me into the casual table a couple of times. I have lost at the casual tables for the reason I'm not exaggerating, like, oh well, maybe I'll lose. No, genuinely, like they were like, okay, well I'm just gonna kill your artifacts on that. Well then, just gotta sort of sit here and twiddle my thumbs. But it's a very fun deck. I do recommend people try it, and yeah. Hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys enjoy the deck if you do build it. The Deck list will be in the description at the bottom. It will be a list that I constantly upgrade. So if I do upgrade it, I will be updating the list that's in the description because that's how I try to do it with all my decks. That being said, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta.